Hi, everybody. It's Nancy Reyes with For Your Canine.
And black screen Joanne with For Better For Worse.
And Lisa Bataska with Canine Defined.
Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about a multi-dog household. So let us know you're there. Whether you have a multi-dog or thinking about adding more dogs to your home, this might be of interest or some good information. So hopefully you're there. Joanne is joining us on the road. I know it's a shock to all of you. We were elsewhere all weekend. So hey, Tim, how are you? And so we're going to be there to talk a little bit about having multiple dogs. Or I know there's a few people that might be joining us that might be interested in adding a dog to their homes and kind of what a nice way to do that and how to manage it and all that stuff. And then, hats off to those of you who only have one dog because that's really, you know, that's kind of nice and fun because I haven't had one dog in a long time. So
The willpower is very strong with those people.
yes, yes, absolutely. So today we're going to talk about about how to manage multiple dogs and and how to create more harmony because that's usually one of the the challenging things we have as we add dogs or as we transition, right? As we go from maybe two dogs, three dogs to two dogs, they pass away or we add one. We really wanted to talk about how to make that easier or better um, for everyone involved, including the human, right? And kind of some tips to be able to manage things, and again, have harmony in the house, right? Because that's really what it's all about. And sometimes sometimes it might be difficult to have that harmony, but we're going to try to manage, talk a little bit how to manage a house where everybody doesn't get along so wonderfully. So that's what we're going to talk about and kind of discuss and be open to any questions. Yeah. So first, we'll kind of start with. I currently have four dogs in my home, four dogs and two cats. So that's my pack for right now. I have two young ones that are 4 years old, a shepherd and a lab, and then I have a 12-year-old Min Pin Chihuahua mix and a 14-year-old Jack Russell Terrier that is a new addition to my home. She came to me in November. That used to be Patty's dog. So they're right now we're at four, two seniors and two young ones. Dogs. Cats are a whole nother Facebook Live. All right. And Lisa.
I have 5 dogs. I have a 14-year-old and 8-year-old. They're both mini Aussies. And then I have a Dutch Shepherd who is 4, and a Border Collie who is 3, and then a 2-year-old cattle dog that rescue that I added. So,
Joanne.
I have a 5-year-old Vizsla. I have a 4-year-old Doberman. I have a 9-year-old Border Collie. And I also have 4 rats and a snake and a fish. But they're all in cages separately, so they don't count.
wow.
Yep. And in my yes. So we're going to talk about ages too. That's one of the things I told Lisa and Joanne to remind me about talking about different ages and how that affects the pack. But one of the things we wanted to start discussing is how to have harmony when it comes to feeding time, right? Because I think there are people that all the dogs can eat together, and people who separate their dogs. Um, one of the things that I learned a long time ago was a dog or any animal should be free to eat in their home, nice and comfortable, and not have to worry about anybody taking their food, right? So currently, I have 3 dogs that eat together and one that eats in another room on the other side of the gate. And everybody's happy with it. It's comfortable, and feeding time is pleasurable for all involved. So my shepherd and the 2 old ones eat together in the same room, and my lab eats in the in the family room because she finishes before everyone else. So one of the things that you need to think about feeding time, you want to make sure that everybody is comfortable with the setup that you have, right? Whether they're all together or separate or whatever. And it's okay if they have to be separate, right? Like with my lab, to avoid any problems as a young dog, she would eat very quickly and she'd be looking for everybody else's food. And it's not fair to the other dogs that she's going to be coming around trying to take their food. So she eats separately. She used to be able to eat with Cha-Cha in the same room. She would never try to get her food, but now she's gone. So that's kind of how we do now. And it's fine, and everybody eats comfortably and happy, and there's no issue. So Lisa and Joanne.
I'm even going to add to that. Yeah, I said I'm even going to add to that. Not just when you put those bowls down, right? Because my two dogs that actually do get along, my border collie gets very amped when food is being prepared, and she doesn't hurt my Vizsla, but she definitely might run around and run into him, and he definitely doesn't enjoy that. So I kind of make sure as I'm preparing food, they're separated, and then they can eat next to each other and be fine. So sometimes just the art of preparing the food, you need to watch out for some things as well.
Yep, absolutely. With my guys, my oldest dog right now, he's always hungry and always looking for food. So if there's any opportunity, he's not nice to the other dogs as they walk by. Or he'll try to hard stare them and they're not even paying attention, right? So then all of a sudden there's a correction and then that type of stuff. So I separate them. He's out by himself, Ivy's in a crate, and the other three are crated. I've done it where I've had 7 littles and everybody ate in the same kitchen and they all knew their spots and went to it without a problem. But I don't do that now. Also, as we get older, it's just sometimes we pick our battles on what's important to us. So, and I'm able to manage that.
Yeah. And again, there's no hard and fast rule. It's where it's going to be the best for the dogs, right? And maybe if you have multiples like we do, where you can make that combination where everybody's enjoyable. The big tip off though, you guys, is that your dog should be able to eat in a calm fashion and not have to worry. Eating or feeding time should be calm and relaxed so that there is no issue. Because one of the biggest problems with altercations in the home of dogs, even if they're not big fights, but little altercations, is stress, right? So you want to make sure that feeding time is stress-free, and some of the other things we're going to go through are stress-free. Stress is what creates issues or problems. If one dog isn't comfortable with the situation or how it's set up, because what we do is we get so tied into it, or it's got to be like this, that we just have to do what makes the animal feel comfortable so that there is no stress around feeding time and all that stuff. And then they can, and like in Joanne's case, even prep time, because what happens, that it increases arousal. And then by the time food comes, then you can have a bigger problem, right? So you want to really evaluate that, like dogs barking and carrying on and jumping up and down. I really don't train. I don't like my dogs to do that, right? So, and Joanne doesn't either, right? Joanne puts her somewhere else where she's not able to get herself all whipped up that way. So that way there isn't a problem, right? Because a lot of the stuff is just making it so that there isn't a problem to begin with, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And yes, in the living room, yeah. So it's just better to sometimes just make sure that everybody's happy with the situation, and that would and there's no stress involved, right? Yeah, and if they eat about the same time, it's it's pretty convenient. So
right, yep. There's a resource guard, or
yeah, and if you have resource guarders or whatever, again, it's stress that causes some of these arguments in some of these little situations, right? The other one is going in and outside, going through the doorways. Some of the worst fights I've had in my own home, and and through with my customers has been through doorways,
Mhm.
going in and outside.
Yep.
So that's usually that's a big place for lots of altercations and fights and stuff like that. Um, so there's a bunch of ways we can make that better. So Lisa, how do you manage that in your house?
Management. So if I'm not going to, I'm actively working just like, hey, I'm in a hurry, whatever. I let one dog out at a time and make them sit at the door. And I have a slider. I start at the kennel, and then I go to the gate, then I go to the door, the slider, then to the outside door. So I have plenty of opportunities to rehearse relaxing before I release you forward. So that's how I do it. And I just do one at a time. If I, if I'm actively trying to train it, what I'll do is I will, utilize more reinforcement rather than management tools. So opportunities, you make a good choice, you relax, I'll pay you or something. You don't push at the doorway, you back up, I pay you for that. So little fine things like that, but that's a process to change if you've allowed it to happen for a period of time.
Jody, why there's a question? Why are doorways a problem area? It's a space issue because we think is enough space for the dogs is not what they think is enough space, and it creates a conflict, especially if they don't like each other or don't want to be near each other. The doorways are narrow spaces, and that creates a lot of conflict for the dog. Joanne, how do you handle letting your guys out?
So my two don't have the Vizsla and the Border Collie. They don't have any problems. I mean, they're just they share space very, very nicely. So you know what? It's something I just don't have to deal with. But I'll tell you, the Doberman, even by himself, he spins and cries spins in circles, right, to go out the door. So just that simple act of opening the door is so over arousing for him. He finds it hard to keep it together. So we work on sits at the door, right? And in the very beginning, he sat and I would put my hand up to touch the door and he'd get up and spin and scream. And it was like, nope, you need to sit back down. I remember the first time it took like 10 minutes to even get him to go outside because I made him wait, right? Yeah. It's very hard to keep yourself under control. But he'll throw himself at the glass slider and those are very expensive. Number one. Number two, I don't want him to hurt himself. So it's kind of like Lisa said, right? I've tried to train it. He's 4 years old. We continue to work on it. But I mean, I think at this point, it's pretty clear, right? This is just going to be you need to sit at the door before it's open. But, to that point, and you were mentioning too, doorways and space issues, I just wanted to throw in there too. Think about places in your own home. And I always find like couches and coffee tables.
Yep.
Are a really big space because again, the dogs both want to be near you. Maybe you're feeding treats, pets, whatever, and they're trying to squeeze in there. Tight spaces, even if it's not a doorway, can cause problems too.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and I have two big ones and two little ones. Oh. I'm very, very careful of my big ones not hurting my little ones. So I usually let my big ones out first, my two, and then the little ones will follow suit when they go out together. I do make my dogs wait at the door because especially the big one, and sometimes I have to hold them back a little bit. Or I let the littles out first, then I let the big ones out after that. So he doesn't hurt. The young ones don't hurt my little older ones. So I'm very, very, very careful about that because it doesn't take much for those big dogs they may not mean to hurt the little dogs, but it could happen. So I'm very, very mindful of that. And my German Shepherd, he gets pretty excited about going outside. He doesn't spin like the Dobermans do, but he can get himself pretty excited about going out and about too. So he's usually the one that sometimes we might let him out by himself and then the girls can come out after him. So we manage that very, very well in that so that nobody gets hurt in my house. Like I don't have that bumping problem or doorway problem, but I still don't want my little ones to get hurt, and I don't want it to develop, right? Especially as an older dog gets older, if there's a bump and it hurts, they might
Right. Right.
come out and go after the young dog. And so you don't want to create a problem where isn't there. Doorways are it's space issues are really a big deal for dogs. We don't to us it seems like oh it should be just fine, but it's not. That's why outside sometimes dogs do better outside when there's more open space versus inside.
Yep.
Or they get along better outside versus inside, right?
Right now, I find it interesting. So Lucas is 14, right? And he kind of likes the young dog energy when he likes it. He likes the run out the door thing because it's something I allowed him to practice when he was young. So he just run with the other dogs, chasing them. And now at 14 years old, there's moments where he gets excited about running out the door with them. And then he trips and I'm like, oh, go buddy. And then he falls and I'm like, oh, I hope you're not, he still has that inability to recognize how to be very aware of his body. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I have to really be careful with that. So I'll let him out with, the two little ones so that he can still run because they'll run. So yeah, it's pretty funny how when they age, they really, just like people, don't realize what it means physically to them,
Right. And I know Debbie, those of us that have multiple dogs, we do have to have routines in our homes because we need to have them, right? Because just to keep order, and that way there is no problem. Because a lot of what the routines are for is so there isn't a problem. There's not a problem. So there's not a problem where you don't create a problem where there isn't one, right? Because that's the big problem, you guys. It's like there's management and there's training. If you're able to train your dog to go out one at a time and on impulse control and all that, by all means. But when you cannot train it, manage it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Manage the they go ahead and they need to manage to be able to go in and outside. And like Debbie has a few dogs and they have to wait before they go outside and all that stuff. So it's really helpful when you have some of those things in place. And especially if you have young dogs, they start to learn that. And then you don't have a problem as they get older. Right. And as they age, then, you might relax the rules a little bit and not have it be such a ritual. My dogs are pretty good about waiting to be fed. Right now, Daisy, who's 14-year-old, she barks as I'm preparing. So she doesn't do much else but that, which is annoying only for me. Doesn't seem to bother the other dogs. But it's one of those things. So it's one of those things, putting things in place that will help that. Right. That's a really good question,
Yeah.
Den. Actually, let me talk. I'm gonna go back to that. We're gonna go back to that question. Joanne, the question is, should sex of dogs be considered? But we'll go back to that. I just want Joanne to know so that she doesn't let me forget. So playing and resources, right? Getting on the furniture, who gets on there, all that, all those things should be trained. That's why I only invite the dogs to come up. They don't get to come up on the furniture without my permission. Most of my big dogs don't get on the furniture. My little ones do. And now that I have less little ones, it's, they're older, they can't get up there. But those are all things that should have rules around it as well. Especially if they're uncomfortable about resources, I don't allow dogs to, when somebody's playing with something, nobody else is allowed to come and take it because it's not fair. Right. So I'm really pretty big about that. They shouldn't, if somebody's enjoying a bone, nobody can just come and get it because not really fair. So,
well, and I would just add to that, right, Nance? Even if the dog lets the other dog take it, don't let that happen.
Right.
It's rude, and it will create things potentially down the road.
Right. Again, it's going to create stress in the environment. That's a big thing. It creates stress in the environment, in the house, right? It's no different than when you were a sibling. If you had brothers and sisters, if somebody came, you're doing something and your brother or sister came and took it, there would be an issue. There would be a discussion about it, right? So it's no different with the dogs. Yeah, I haven't found a way to keep. So, I would say if you have a young dog, they would get their toy, and I would use. I'm really big, and those of you who've worked with me with reactivity, I tend to use tether a little bit, especially when they were young puppies. I tend to tether them by me so they can have their space and they don't have the freedom to make those poor decisions. So that way they learn from a young age
Right.
to respect the stuff of the other dogs. I don't know, Lisa, do you do that something similar? I mean, now that they're older, obviously I don't do that. But when they were young puppies, I did.
What? Yeah, I mean, part of it was like, I mean, the dogs I have were so fair, some more than others. So the ones that weren't fair weren't by my puppy at all. But when I'd have the puppy drag a leash in the house and stuff, and just be mindful to let some appropriate corrections occur, but be able to be there to make sure it was, it was safe. So that's what I would do when they're young and so forth. If they take away the toy or the older dog lets them, I'd be like, no, you can't do that. And again, this is all very developmentally, it's staged based upon where they are. Like I wouldn't do that with maybe an older dog that I brought into the house, but I start off right away with the puppy doing things like this. Yes.
Well, and then the only one I had a little problem with, and I was very fortunate to have Cha-Cha when these two were young, because she was very fair and very appropriate. So she taught them well. I didn't have to use tethering as much with these two as I did with Bailey when she was a puppy, because she was horrible. So, so she was a little worse about food and about a lot of other stuff. So I used that more with her than I have. But these two, I didn't really have to use it very much at all. And Cha-Cha was very, very fair. Cha-Cha would let them know this is okay and this is not okay, and so on and so forth. But I did have Rizzo, who's a 12-year-old, did have resource guarding issues. So I had to use a line and tether her and work on that so that there would be no issue and nobody would hurt her because she's little.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, yeah. See, so that's what I mean. Resource guarding from the youngest male. So that's what I mean. You want to manage that situation, and they should be able to have their toys or their bones, and that should be a good time to be together around the other dogs in your house. If they all, if you want, and usually not that I get to watch TV much, but when I did back in the day, they would be tethered. Everybody would get a bone or whatever, and everybody would be together and enjoy that. And that was family time. And it really became a nice time for them. And then after a while, there was no more tethering. They just would hang out and chew on stuff. And it was never a problem after that. But they learned early on how to manage that.
Well, Jill had just brought up, like, that was the problem. My older dogs have never corrected her on anything.
Yeah.
So when you have those kinds of dogs that are a little more submissive, I don't know. I think I would probably try to find more appropriate dogs that would be fair in their correction to help that dog learn some body language and not allow them to keep that up, because that's going to be really bad. So, I think we can't always rely upon the other older dog just to do our work, because we also have a part in it as well.
Yeah, so, because the problem is, if the puppy gets used to, they might decide to do that to another dog that's not their, and that's when the problems are an issue, right? Mm-hmm. So if your child doesn't learn something from their siblings and they try to do it to a kid at school, guess what? You're going to go to the principal's office. Because it's a problem. And I do think to a certain extent dogs should work things out, but I do not allow a scuffle is okay. But if it's going to look like it's going to escalate to more, I don't allow that ever to happen.
Nope.
Because that becomes a bigger problem. And even Joanne can probably speak to this better. She, her dogs never really had a fight. They had a scuffle, but it was enough of a situation that they just, and for her, and Joanne can probably elaborate a little bit more on it. It was a personality thing. They don't really care for each other. It's like, some of our brothers and sisters, we love them, but we don't like them necessarily. Right. Joanne, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here. I'm just muted because I'm on the road. So
yep.
Yeah. So, it's hard as humans, right? We bring in dogs because we love them and we want everybody to be a great big happy family, and sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. I joke with people and I say, Noah has a sweater vest and sips tea and reads poetry by the fire, and Bam is from Jersey Shore. He's a frat guy, and right, he likes to party, and they just don't get along, right? They're just not meant to be friends.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's hard trying to keep everybody separate, but I think, again, when they were puppies, or Noah was a year old and Bam was a puppy, I did notice some things, right? Like Bam would play a little more rough, and Noah was okay with that, but he'd throw off some little growls, which is totally appropriate. And that's what we're talking about, is like, let that older dog, right, give a little bit of a correction, like, hey, stop that. Unfortunately, I think Bam was like, I don't care what you say, from a very early age. And it turned into, what are you looking at? What are you looking at? Looking at you. What do you want to do about it? What do you want to do? Right. And so it's like, when you have that, it's just like, you go to your corner and you go to your corner and knock it off. Right. So I think one of the biggest takeaways is the fact that I didn't wait for a fight. I think, in the world of what we see as trainers, people are like, they've fought 4 times, and the last 2 times they had to go to the vet. 1 needed stitches. Right. And now think about it. They have 4 fights that, were pretty serious under their belt. What do you think the 5th one's going to be? It's never going to be less than,
Right.
what it was the last time. And so, as humans, let's be fair, we're all stupid sometimes. We get tired. We might forget a gate.
Yep.
So it's really great that I never let it get to that point, because
Right.
there was one moment last year where a gate was open and they rushed in. One was in there. One came in. What are you doing in here? What are you doing in here? You're not supposed to be in here. Neither are you. And I was like, why don't we go this way? And, instead of like, what are you doing here? Rawr, and they jump on each other. It was a shock, kind of, because they're not together. So it gives me time to continue to make sure something bad doesn't happen.
Right. So Sandra asked, if a toy gets stolen from one by a sibling dog, do you take it away and give it back to the first guy? Yes, absolutely. I give it, if the dog's not going to come and get it. Now, if the older dog walks away from it and the young dog wants to take it, I don't care.
Right.
Clearly, that particular dog was done with it and is not interested in it, so it's fine. You know what I mean? It's totally fine. And again, it's nice if you have a dog in the home that's very good about clarifying the rules for the dogs. It's wonderful. But the truth is, some dogs aren't really going to do that, or their corrections might be a little too hard. And then then it can create other issues that you don't have. Right. So, if the dogs are passive, like Jill's dogs tend to be a little more passive, then you need to put some structure and help the young puppy, kind of figure out the rules. Or if you're able to have her, and this is where playtime with having play dates with other dogs is really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Then they can help teach her some dog to dog stuff. I'm not big on dog parks or lots of social time. I think time that dogs spend together should be learning, especially when they're young. This is appropriate. This is not appropriate. So dogs can give each other that information. Over time, Labs and Goldens tend to be dog park dogs, if you will, or other doggy dogs for life. Most of the other working breeds don't. The Malinois, the Sheppy, the Dutchies, and the Dobermans don't tend to be lifetime doggy dogs. They just, I think good structured social play and social time is good for so they can learn how to behave around other dogs and understand other dogs and understand dog body language, so that when they're out and about in the world, they know it's not new to them. They already understand it. So
right. Well, I'll tell you, for me, like with the puppies, so that you can help mold some of that. I do like to introduce, I think with the socialization aspect, when you have young dogs too, I think it's important to be around other dogs and not necessarily ever interact with them. They need to learn. I mean, me personally, I would want that first before I ever say, okay, go say hi to this dog on leash and then let's go. Because essentially they're going to turn and say, well, I'm going to say hi, and never even asking for permission, because it's so much more reinforcing to say hi than it is to listen to you.
Right.
So, there's different, but for me, I should always say that I prefer my dogs to be more attentive to me, just knowing that then that's a less of a distraction I have to worry about. They can check it out and say hi when I give them permission, or they just ignore it. I mean, it's very different. So to me, I'm big on that.
Yeah. And so, and for example, I have an intact male. And so I'm very cautious about who he plays with, because I want to make sure he's always stays safe.
Right.
And he has friends he plays with on a regular basis every once in a while, but it's not all the time. When he was young, he did have exposure to more dogs, so he learned a little bit more, and my lab did too. But as they grow older and get more mature, they have to ask permission to go say hi to other dogs, and they also have very specific dogs they play with. They just don't get to go play with everybody, because I worry that my shepherd is a very delicate flower, and I worry that somebody will hurt him. So like Jive plays a lot with, and not so much anymore. She's decided, I don't know, he doesn't like the sweater vest guy. I don't know. Her and Noah, and she plays a lot with Melanie's dog. Quite often, and they get to, when they see each other, not often, every once in a while when we get together, they get to be together and they get to play, and it's usually a short play time, and they enjoy each other, and then that's it, it's over. But they're all able to come off the play, they're all able to play very nicely. It's a very controlled situation. Bam gets to play with Amy's Nova, and they get to play with so they have some doggy friends. They don't need to have a whole bunch of them, and just to keep that those skills sharp, and then learning how to control themselves and understand other dog body language as they get, especially through adolescence, right? As they get older, like now they're 5, they don't play as long and as much as they used to when they were younger. So
yeah.
And as you say that, I just want to point out, right? We all got dogs very similar times to each other, and when they were puppies, right? Yeah, we had big puppy play groups, right? And then as they aged a little, right, it was smaller groups. And adolescence, right? So usually it depends on every dog, but usually, right, that's somewhere between 7 months and 18 months. I mean, ideally 2 years. And every dog is different. So that is the stage where you're going to start to see sometimes those behaviors, those push button, what are you going to do about it if I take that, right? And those are the moments where you kind of want to start backing off. If you're a big dog park or we play with everybody kind of thing, just maybe cut back a little bit and just observe more what you see, because a month ago they could have had the time of their lives, and all of a sudden now you're starting to see some things, and that's really common in the adolescent space.
Right. And Jody, I see that some people do. A lot of times when you have the same, and it's hard to say sometimes, because I know people who have all intact animals and they live just fine, and then people who have other intact animals and they don't do fine. It really depends on the dogs. Where I see some issues, if you have a very anxious dog and a more confident dog, or things like that, where you can see some problems coming up with that. And always when you have same sex, it's always a chance you're taking, right? That they're not going to always get along. Some breeds are more pack oriented than others, like beagles and huskies. Some of the Vizslas, dogs that usually are bred to work in packs, they tend to have less issue with other dogs. Not that they don't, but it's less usually. The working dogs, shepherds, males, Rotties, they're usually not really, you really have to orchestrate well if you're going to have a multiple home with those kind of breeds. So, like for example, I have shepherds. I would probably not choose to have two male shepherds or two female shepherds. It's one of each, right? Lab, you can probably get away with having multiple females or multiple males without too much of a problem, but you still might because it depends on the personality, right? But some of the terriers too, having multiple same-sex terriers, probably not a really good idea. Again, not that other people haven't done it successfully, but it's usually because the personalities of the dogs are just so that they're able to adjust and they get along fine. They got lucky, right? And sometimes if you've had multiple times where you've had the same sex and it's not been a problem, you just got lucky that everybody got along. But that just because it's not a given that they're going to get along when you add another one and another one, it's not a given, right? You can always not, they can just not get along. It's just like people, right? Sometimes if they got a new office, the office gets along really well and somebody leaves and they have a new one, then yeah, you're not going to get along so great with the new person, but like you did with the person before them. So, the personalities are a big deal. And that's why temperament testing, like I do a lot of that. And that's why I made sure that my dogs would get along, because I already lived in a house with a separate house where there was, fights and stuff. I already did that. So I'm good. I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, that's hard. Well, Charlie was, wow, he was bad. And like, he would pick fights with everybody in the house. I mean, it was terrible. And then, I thought it was, at first I was like, oh, and I noted it, but then I didn't realize how he hit a certain age and it kind of got worse. So, yeah. And he has his own room. This was his room, this area here, until he passed. And then when he passed, I was like, holy cow, wow, all that management.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. And yeah, sometimes if you same sexes, but again, some people have just been lucky. They can have two male shepherds, they can have two, and it depends on the temperament of the dog. Because just because you were successful with two male shepherds or two male Dobermans or whatever, one point doesn't mean you're going to have that same luck later on, right? Because the thing is, a lot, like for those of us, most of us, as we go through, we learn what we do want and what we don't want. I wanted a more confident dogs. With more confidence, then comes where you can have a little bit more issues, right? Because they're more confident. If you or like in Jody's case, you have some anxiety issues there. And if you have if you have two anxious dogs, it's probably fine. It's not going to have too many problems. But if you have a dog that's anxious and one that's not, or one that's young, it just gets really stressful. Yes. And Jody, it is very exhausting. Trust me when I tell you, I lived it and it wasn't fun at all. Yeah, that's why we're putting some things in place where there's some things that you can avoid to avoid that stress. And the more stress you take away in the situation of the house, the simpler, the more comfortable they'll be, and the more stress-free, and the better chance of everybody kind of getting along and not having too many issues. So,
right.
So yeah.
It's interesting too, right? Like, saying it's exhausting, because in the beginning it's just more sad to me, like I just wanted a big happy family. But once you get used to it, it's no different than like shutting a baby gate behind you, like to keep a toddler out, right? I mean, it just becomes life. So once you get a good setup where everybody can feel safe, it just seems it's less exhausting, because then you're not always having to keep your eye on who's looking at what, and is this going to be okay? Can I go and right. have that second glass of wine at night?
Right. And Deb asks, is adding an adult dog different than adding a puppy? It is different, but you can have success with both of those things, right? If you add an adult-ish dog with an already adult dog, it might take a little longer for the intro, but if it's the right dog, it's not a problem. And if you had a puppy, there's different challenges there. But no, there's not. It's different for sure on incorporating them, but they're not the one's not better, if you get my drift. It's not better to add a puppy in versus an adult. It just depends on what we're looking at, right? Is what kind of adult are you adding? Like I know Deb's asking, in her case, a male is probably going to be a better option for her situation with Mindy, because a male will probably always defer to a female. So it'll be an easier transition for Mindy, for the dog, than it would if you had two females, right? That may never get along. So yeah, Terry, I have to say, I think I was talking to, I can't remember who I was talking to this week about that. It's like, it's interesting. And I'm going to pick on the dog trainers. Some dog trainers are constantly picking the tougher dogs. I don't want to. I did that already. I managed my house, and I wanted something else. I didn't want to have to do that anymore, because I had chow chows that fought. It was really bad. And they drew blood. It was really bad, very expensive situation for a long time. And then I had other dogs that got along a little bit better, and that improved some, but still a lot of management, because I had 7 dogs at that time. And then now I got to live where there's, everybody gets along for the most part. There's slight management, but nothing major. And I like that a lot better. I'm very mindful about if I'm going to add a puppy or another dog or even a cat, I am very thoughtful about how I do that and what I'm bringing in. So we lost Joanne.
Yeah.
She'll be back.
With me, I've tried to, periodically I'd foster older dogs. And it was always very tricky because I wanted to help the dog and so forth. But when my dogs, how they interacted with each other, they could give some information to the other. But it was, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, but I know it happens. But yeah, it's one of those things. It's like you get to a point where you don't want to deal with that anymore, and so you're a little bit mindful about what comes in your house, especially when you're fostering, because you get foster. Because even still, fostering, those of you who do that, you really have to make sure that it's going to fit in your home and it's going to be able to get along. They don't have to be buddies with your other dogs, but it's not going to cause any more stress. Again, remember, stress causes fights and stuff. So because bringing a new dog, even if it's temporary, is going to cause some stress in your house. So you want to really be thoughtful. Gail, adding a new, and sometimes, you did the right thing by adding a female. So when they're very young puppies, it's a little worrisome, because they're babies, they're small. But as they get older, the females kind of take over. So that's what happened. That happens at my house. Chacha passed away, and Jive's like, "Yep, I can walk in that path." And Tango is very okay with that. he's okay. And going and getting to that actually is about hierarchy in the house, right? Obviously, and I'm gonna say, and Joanne and Lisa can correct me. I think there should be a leader in the house, and it's usually better if it's the person.
Absolutely.
That goes without saying.
Right.
Okay. Should be the people. However, there is going to be, a lot of times when you have a lot of conflict in your house between dogs, everybody thinks that the dog that's aggressing or the problem is the dominant dog, and that's usually never the case. Usually it's the middle management that are fighting. And if you think about it in a corporate structure, that's exactly where all the fighting is.
Right.
So in dogs, usually the leader or the top dog or whatever you want to call it, it's usually a dog that doesn't get into any kind of fights or discussions at all. They just hang back. They let the middle management duke it out. So usually it's less confident dogs, more anxious dogs, and that are usually the ones that are, if there's going to be arguments or fights, that's what it's going to be. So.
Right. So somebody reached out to me and had said, "Hey, would you talk about how to acclimate a new dog to the house?" I don't know if you guys have ideas on that, but what I will typically do is I make sure my dogs are put up before I ever let the other dog, excuse me, the other dog come through my house.
Right.
And I take them and I let them walk around the yard, check it out and so forth, feel them out. How are you in this space? Who are you? That type of stuff. So I kind of start an understanding of who they are. And then I might give them a break and then let my dogs out, check everything out. Okay, yeah, there's another dog here. Then they're like, hey, what's up? So my dogs are kind of used to dogs coming in and out of the house. So I know who's who, so I know how to match dogs properly. So I always go with the most benign first. And if I know there's another one that's not so nice, they may take a little while before they ever get to know that puppy. And I just gradually, introduce through crates or gating, any of that kind of stuff. Just be careful and watch the body language as your dog approaches the other dog. And watch both of them, of course, but so that if they're going to grab it, I'm thinking of a puppy because this happened to me. One of my puppies got grabbed in the face by Lucas because he's very crabby. And all I heard was, the German blood curdling scream, so I'm careful of that too, so it's a slow introduction, one at a time. Don't overwhelm. It's not fair to the dog if you overwhelm and they're trying to walk in the door. And I see sometimes that happens too. So
yeah. And Sandra, you asked what ages of behavior is less likely to change. Yeah, if you have a 20-month-old Shepherd Husky, you're probably okay. Usually the most challenging time is between, 12 to 14 months, and starting from 12 months until they're about, 18 months is usually when it can get pretty gnarly. Not that it can't get gnarly before then, but it can. But if you're at 20 months, he's been at your home for 6 months and they get along so far, you should be good to go. Yeah. On that, right?
He's a nice boy.
Yeah.
That's Harvey. I know what she's talking about. It's
Yeah.
Harvey. I was like, he is so nice. The way he just kind of, his ability to like emotionally switch his states with dogs, and how he was able to adjust to her other dog. And then she asked me to look at him and I did. And yeah, it was, he's lovely. He's got really nice social skills.
Yep. And one of the things is, and this goes back, Lisa was talking about fostering, but also even if you're introducing a dog that's going to stay, that you're thinking of keeping and staying in your home, whether it's a puppy, you really want to be careful doing nice, slow introductions to your pack. It's just, I promise you, taking it slow, it'll work out really, really well. It won't be a big deal. It's if you try to rush it and just throw everybody in and hope to God it works out. If it doesn't, then it stinks.
Yeah. Really bad.
It can be, then it really is going to just be it's going to be a mess, and it's going to be something that's going to be a problem for a long time. So I highly recommend, whether it's a puppy, giving them time to acclimate, and it could go anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks. And if you're doing an adult, sometimes it might be a couple of months, but it's going to be worth the time taking it slow so that everybody's comfortable, and then you'll have success and you won't have to worry about it. Right. And I can speak to my friend Patty, who died. I was a little concerned about her Malinois mix being rehomed because they had a male dog and he wasn't particularly great with males. So these people Dana and Miguel were wonderful. They took their time. They did a slow introduction. And now those two dogs are best buddies. So doing it right, throwing them in together would have probably not gone well.
Right.
The way they did it was perfect. And now they have two dogs that get along just fine, and they don't even have to worry about it. It's not even a problem. It's when you do it too soon that it becomes a deal. A bigger deal.
Right.
Yeah. Joanne, do you have anything to add?
No, Amy and I did rescue together, Doberman rescue. We just keep giving Dobermans a bad name, but when we did rescue together, it was very, very true. And we would tell people, like, you can't go too slowly, but if you go too fast, and like you said, Nancy, if it goes bad, you can't take that terrible interaction back, right? So, just think about the last time you met someone that like you didn't like them the first moment you met them, whatever it was. I don't know, the sound of their voice, or they said something that ticked you off, and then 3 months later you're like, oh, they really are a very, very nice person. I like them a lot. A lot of times with dogs, right, it's a 50-50 shot. If they have a bad interaction in the beginning, they never go well again. They just hold a grudge, and sometimes they don't. But I don't ever want to take that chance. So the only other thing that I would throw in there, and it's a little old school, but when you're introing, right? I know, like Lisa, you said all yours were in a crate. You bring the new dog in. I know when I was fostering, I would do the same, but I don't let the new dog go up to my dog's crates. I just want to throw that. I know you don't either, but just put it out there.
Good point.
And then, and then I do put that new dog in a crate in a room behind an X pen, right, or a gate or some sort of. Because can you imagine like being on display? You don't know where you are, and then like everyone's looking in the glass, like, "Hey, what are you doing in there?" So right, dogs have a lot of senses, so just think about how much information they take in just from their auditory and olfactory systems, right? They can get to know the routines by sight or by smell, and what they hear you do in your house. I usually keep them in a crate for about 24 hours, not a full 24 hours, but I mean, right, I keep them away from everything, let them decompress.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and Sue Poor had mentioned she was very concerned about getting another dog, and I knew Penny would be totally fine with a nice, lovely male shepherd, and of course she is. She's a great big sister. She spanks him when he needs it, and she plays with him when he needs that. So, so that goes back to Deb Plowman's question about the sex and all that. It really depends on the resident dog. If you have a resident dog that tends to be, like, say, if he's a male and he tends to not be so great with other males, then you would probably want to get a female. For certain ones, like shepherds, dobies, rotties, you can have same sex, but you really have to have two pretty laid back, chilled out dogs. If you have one that's a little more than the other one, or not as tolerant, it can become a problem later when they become adolescent, right? So it depends on your particular dog. If your particular dog is a little worried or not so great around other male dogs, I would have a female. If not, you can probably, there are some dogs you can get any sex and it'll be fine. It doesn't matter. But you want to assess those dogs so that that it won't be a problem. So, like, for example, I when I was choosing my lab, I wanted her to be pretty tolerant of other dogs, and I wanted her to be pretty laid back because I did have a female shepherd at that time. And so I wanted to make sure there was harmony there. And there was very much. And even with all that, Jive, when she was, I think, 12 months, maybe 15 months, decided she was going to see if she could challenge Cha-Cha a little bit. And Cha-Cha was like, I don't think so. And it was a very small scuffle, but it was enough to let Jive know that no, we don't do that. Right. And that was the end of it, and never happened again. But you see, even Jive, as sweet and laid back as she is, she was at that age. She goes, I'm going to see what happens. And it's like, no, don't do that, right? I mean, it was totally fine. And it was totally fine. And with Tango, when I got him, I knew that another female shepherd was not going to be a good idea with Cha-Cha and Jive. So I got a male shepherd, so that, again, to keep the harmony. And he's very laid back and very chilled, and a lot of his temperament was perfect for our house and our home and our setup. So I was very mindful of that when I chose him. I also do that when choosing my cats too, right? Mm-hmm. I want to make sure that they have the right temperament to fit in my house. If they're worried or pretty anxious, then they're probably not going to be do all right in my house. It's going to be a problem for them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm just particular about females being together. If things don't go well, and depending on size, they they can go bad pretty quickly, right? And pretty badly. So I guess for me, I'm always super concerned about when I'm adding a female to my group. Like right now, I would say Cadence is not super confident around other dogs. And if a dog tries to correct her or gets weird on her, she's like, blah, yells at her, comes back and waits to see if the other dog's going to respond. And she's not confident, right? So that could trigger another dog to have a problem. And so I'm careful because of that. And that's important to me.
And that's true. And I don't know, Joanne and Lisa can I do a lot of dog to dog aggression cases, a lot. I've had more success with males getting back together and getting along than females, for sure. I would say males, 80% of the cases we can work those out. Females, maybe 50, maybe. Many times with the females, one of them has to be rehomed.
Yep.
Because it's so bad. Females are different. When it goes bad with females, it goes really bad with females. Males,
yeah, but isn't that true in life, right? I always joke, like, two guys can get in a fist fight and go have a beer afterwards. And, somebody said, I heard she said something bad about me. I hate her now for the next 10 years. Right? Right. Something would happen. So it's like, I don't know. It's just funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say, yeah, unfortunately, and sometimes that is the right answer, rehoming, and that's true, Terry. Females will fight to the death.
Oh yeah.
Not even joking.
Yeah.
Not even in a ha funny way. When they don't get along, and if they don't get along, it's serious for sure. Right? Very serious. They will not get along. And they will fight to the bitter end. And so yeah. So I would, like, males, like Joanne said, they can go to, have a fist fight and then they'll be okay with it, but females will never be okay with it. And that's why they're called bitches. Yes, that's true. And yeah, I've had some client dogs that, I mean, they had a young couple came in with 2 dogs, females, had been in a fight. Both of them had drains and stitches. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. They were really, and incredibly, that actually worked out.
Interesting.
That actually worked out. It was
crazy.
One of the few that but again, that was a lot of time, a lot of work, and muzzle training, and the muzzle training was the key for that to go well, and they get along pretty good now, and they're still together. So
yeah,
but that's an exception. Most of the time it's
right. It is a lot of work to really work through that. So people, I think they don't understand the requirement. I mean, there was somebody I was talking to the other day, and she was talking about giving up her dog, and I'm like, okay. We started talking. Well, it turned out, and she sent me video, and it turned out that her the one dog was a little uncertain, like wants to be a boss, but not quite all that confidence there, and would stand there and square off and bark and stiffen and all that stuff to the other dog. And the other dog was avoiding. But then seemed to have, at one point, she's like, okay, I'm done with this, went after the other dog and caused injury of it. And it was enough to scare everybody in the house. And I said, knowing like they're a year apart, 1 and 2 or something. And I was like, yeah, I don't, do you know the amount of work this will require? And the lady said she talked to somebody who said, let's try a different technique like muzzles and stuff. And I'm all for trying to keep dogs in homes, but the amount of work to do that with teaching them how to both muzzle, and, they have to live in muzzles, and most people have a hard time going to classes. Hello, I'm one. You know what I mean? And then we're going to expect them to do all this work. And if they're committed, they will. And if they won't, someone's going to get really hurt. So she ended up returning the dog anyway. So
yeah,
because it wasn't fair. It was the other dog who was getting beat up and seemed very socially intolerant of the other dog at times, although they'd hang out. So, it was a confidence thing and vying for a position type of thing. But anyway, it was interesting.
Yeah, but it does become a bigger issue. The other thing, you want to make sure that it's you, because sometimes if there's again, middle management, right? So like in Jody's case, she has an anxious dog and a young adolescent male. So neither one are real confident about their situation. So it's, so uh, though they can eventually, I think, once a puppy matures, they can eventually grow. They can probably figure it out and put some skills on the older, more anxious dog, um, so that he can not feel that sense of, again, stress, right? Causing, alleviating as much stress as possible. um, and and this is where it goes to fairness. Everybody wants to be fair and treat everybody the same. You cannot.
No.
It is not. You cannot treat a 9-year-old dog that has, or 10, or that already matured and knows all the rules and has already, done all the you cannot give a young whippersnapper the same privilege.
Right.
They haven't earned that. So why do they should get it? There isn't equity. Every dog has to be treated as an individual. And just because
Right.
Fluffy can do it doesn't mean that Rex is going to be able to do it. So it's really important that you want to be fair. And the best way to be fair is to give everybody what they need. Right?
Right.
Everybody gets what they need, whatever that may be. Eating in a crate, stuff like that. The other thing I wanted to touch on before we leave is older dogs. When you have older dogs in your home, be really mindful how the rest of the pack reacts as the dog gets older. You might have situations where they're not things aren't going as well, and it's hard to think of our little fluffy, lovey dogs want to kill the other dog. But when they're older in the real world, that's how it goes. You're old, you can't function, so later for you, right?
It was a little interesting. Actually, Max got cornered outside by a couple of the Aussies, and he's like, "Holy crap!" And they're not big. They're not whatever 30, 40 pounds. Well, my guys were, except for Simon. And a couple of them cornered him, and I saw it, and I'm like, "Oh no, we're not!" I go running out there, and I was like, "Are you insane?" I'm just swatting the others away because I'm like, "You are not going to attack him." They were in position, they were growling and everything, and it was very enlightening at that moment. They actually have teeth, right? We don't think of them that way, and that was was like a really big realization to me at that point where I questioned things. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Can I keep this dog safe now? You know what I mean? Or what's going on with him? Why are they turning? Because this hadn't happened before.
Right.
So yeah, and it was all aging. So.
Yeah. So that way, so just should go without saying, but you would never leave a really old dog with a really young dog, or if you have multiples, even if you have multiple young dogs and one old dog, it should go without saying that they should not be left together to roam around. I've heard of stories where it just didn't go very well, because as dogs age, and it's hard to know why or how and why they do it. You don't know, but you just don't do it. Don't leave your older dog with your younger dogs. Just don't, because it's just not and some of you that have been able to do that have been lucky. I have never set that up. When Chacha was older, she would stay with the smaller dogs that are also older. I would never leave her with my young dogs, even though they get along swimmingly. I wasn't gonna take a chance that one day they might decide it's time for her to go to meet Jesus. So I never set that up. That was never something I would condone. So just something to think about. It is okay. Yeah. So yes, if you have young dogs, it's it's a little easier, right? And it's okay. Yeah, and yeah, Amy, like Nova's a very nice dog, but she would never be left. She's a lovely dog, and I don't think she'd ever hurt another dog. But just even by accident, just running and playing, they could hurt each other. So,
or I think the other thing too, people don't consider, if the dog screams, for example, hurts itself or screams, some dogs are going to go immediately and grab it. I mean, it's the hard truth because they're still animals. You know what I mean? It's hard to think of them that way, but.
And dogs are prey animals.
Yes.
They're predators.
Yep.
So that cute little min pin you have looking at you, they're predators. Just saying. So just putting it out there. So so that's one of the things I wanted to think you guys to think about. So that applies to feeding time, going outside, bedtime, where they sleep, right? If you have a young dog, they might have to sleep in a crate before they earn the right to sleep on the bed or whatever that is. So being fair is actually doing what's necessary for that dog in that age that the dog is, right? That's really, really an important thing. Um, and then playing. And Joanne could probably speak to this too, but having a good playtime should look like this: very give and take,
Mhm.
very everybody's enjoying themselves, nobody's running away, nobody's getting pounded on, all that stuff. That's what it should look like when it change. And even if they're having a nice play session, I am big about giving them a break, letting the arousal come down, and then let them play again if you choose that, right? um so even if they're getting along swimmingly, because what happens is we get a little lazy and we just said, oh, they're playing so nice, so let them just play. Well,
Mhm.
I like to give my dogs a little bit of a break when they're playing. Every once in a while, I mean, I'll let them play for a time, and as long as everybody looks like they're having a good time, I let it roll.
Well, and the other thing too is, right, you all know you have to know your own dogs and like their limits. And, there's a fine point where arousal can tip into aggression. And those are things to consider, right? So management, like, excuse me, prevention or management, like Nancy is talking about in terms of the size of the dogs and stuff, and to get the age of the dogs together. You just don't want to set it up and interrupt those plays, because I've seen it turn. And it's
Yeah.
not cool.
And screaming is a big deal. If you have a screamer,
Yep.
it can incite. Actually, it was Lisa and we used to do a lot of teenage play groups, and we had 3 pit bulls in a play group, and one of the pitties screamed, and it sounded very screamed, and it wasn't screaming at anything in particular. She wasn't hurt or anything. That's how she vocalized, and the other 2 pitties were like
They stopped and looked.
changed their demeanor and were like, okay, everybody call their dogs, because wow, this is not going to go well.
That was
Right.
great.
And and we saw that change in those other 2 dogs. I was like, oh God, this was, so it's very, very mindful of, it's something to think about. So Stephanie says she has a 14-month-old Dane, just added another young puppy. We usually wait until Danes are older to add another one to the household. We're not having any issues. Do you have any? Well, since you have 2 really young dogs, Stephanie, I would wait quite a bit before adding another dog.
Yeah.
Because you've got a 14-year-old that's an adolescent, and then you have a puppy. So wow, you've got some just making sure everything is structured and there's rules in place so that they know, so that you never have a problem.
Right.
Stuff. Joanne, anything to add?
Reading Stephanie's question, that's exactly what I had. I had a 13-month-old and I got a puppy. So, it'll probably be good for a little while. I mean, ideally, I've seen the pictures and they're adorable. Her 14-month-old is just like snuggled around this puppy, right? And they're playing so gently, and but that's what you want to see. So if the 14-month-old is being super with the puppy now, just keep checking in. And I mean, I would say that to everybody, right?
Yep.
It's like we want to come home, we want to love our dogs, we want to live our lives, but like, think about it as like a weekly check-in, right? What did you do this week? And did everything go okay? Did I notice anything funny? Did anybody get crabby? Did anybody seem to not want to play the same way? Did anybody steal toys? I mean, all of these little questions that you can ask yourself. If you have dogs really under 2, a dog under 2, or like approaching the 9-10, you really should be doing kind of these checks to get the status on what's going on in your house, because we get so comfortable, we miss a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. And just because they get along when they're really young does not mean they'll get along when they're grown up.
Right.
Well, if you let things go on, things happen. So.
it was interesting. Lacey just was not tolerant of puppies at all. She hated all the puppies, but she was really good at warning. Remember, she showed her teeth to everyone who came by.
Yeah.
Even just came close. But she was really good with the puppies with that. But I think you always want to make sure. And then as she got older, she was better. She actually liked the puppies a lot more. I mean, the dog, as they matured, hated puppies, loved the other dogs as they got older. So, the relationship changes. And I think we have to consider that with each of the dogs and do your check-in. I start noting who's doing what and so forth. And I try to keep track of that, because then I wonder, is there a physical issue I'm unaware of that I want to address? And maybe they're kind of cluing me in. And I look at that more with my older dogs, but, or even the current ones. Sometimes, like Cadence the other day was playing with the toy and spun so hard, you hear it on the fence post. And I'm like, oh my God, there's a chiropractic bill, right? So that's something else that, that just to consider. It's like, it's just, are you hurting somewhere? What's going on? But you're right. Relationship checkup is important.
Yeah. The other thing I would recommend, Stephanie, if you have 2 young dogs, they should spend some time apart, right? When you go to class, take one and not the other. Go for a walk or go somewhere so that they learn how to be apart. Because when you have 2 young dogs, it's easy for them to really get so bonded. Yep, I did. I have 2 4-year-olds. I mean, they're 2 months apart. So, yeah, I worked very hard when they were young. One would go, one would stay home. One would, you know what I mean? It was constant and very, very mindful that they kept, I kept them pretty. I made sure that they had their own time and they learned how to be in the world
without their buddies. Yeah.
Without their buddies. Right. So that they learn how to handle the world without the other dog. That's really, really important. And if so, it's great that they get along, but it's something that it's a life skill that they need to have. So, yeah, separate events and classes. Yep, really important. Mm-hmm. And again, if you do it, it's probably it'll be a non-issue, right? Because my guys are fine. I can take one, leave the other. They're not happy, but they're okay with it. So. Yeah. There's so much more to the complexities of multi-dog homes, but one of them is gates are your friend. Sometimes a crate might be your friend too, especially when they're young.
Absolutely.
And as they get older, it's probably less so. But when they're young, and fair is giving each dog what they need,
right?
Instead of trying to everybody gets a treat. And there's a lot more training, and we'll probably do another one about how to train some stuff. But these are just little tips that you can start working or incorporating, and those of you who have added a new puppy or have added a new dog, just in general. So,
yeah, Lacey loved the Dobes. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget. Just a quick body language thing. I'll never forget when I was walking Lacey the red Aussie, and we were walking, and her social intelligence, she showed the teeth to everything. Well, she saw when we were doing stuff. A couple of the dogs were harassing her, and one was the Dobe. And so she came around the corner and she saw this Dobe. She showed all her teeth, licking her, almost hissing. I'm like, wow, that's quite the display. And then she looked over at Vicky and her face got super soft. Hi, Vicky. And I was like, holy smokes, Medusa, all crazy. It was hilarious. Yeah. But anyway.
Very clear though.
Very clear. And then she turned back to the Dobe and did the same thing again. I'm like, I wish I had that on video. It was amazing. So,
yeah, she was quite. She was like very clear, but you're in, you're out.
Absolutely, love her. She was an awesome dog.
I feel like we should label these Facebook lives like "How Not to Love a Doberman." Like.
We got it and they like it.
Yeah. I love a Doberman, so there you go. I'm a little more of those.
When you find a real nice pup, a nice temperament, yeah, for sure. They're nice dogs.
All right, you guys. Have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.